Hello. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing a tax court case that was resolved. Final judgment was given in March of last year in 2023, and the issue was whether the petitioners were entitled to deduct certain job expenses and miscellaneous expenses totaling over $37,000 on their tax return. It does involve a minister and his wife, so I thought this would be interesting for y'all to learn. So let's take a listen. Hello, friend. Welcome to the Church Finance and Minister Tax Podcast. My name is Michelle Brown, and I am honored to be your host. In this podcast, we will discuss topics to help you organize, maximize, and utilize your God-given talents and skills so that you can do what you do best, which is take care of the business side of the church with excellence. If you are a church secretary, bookkeeper, administrative assistant, or any other superpower title you've been given, then this is the podcast for you. So grab your notebook and pen, my friend, and your favorite beverage, and let's get ready to learn something cool today. Hello, and welcome to episode 69 of the Church Finance and Minister Tax Podcast. Church finances and minister taxes is what we do, so we're going to dive right in because we all know why we're here. So today I thought we would discuss a recent, if it's been in the past year, it's recent in IRS language, but a tax court case that involved a minister and his wife who lived in Oklahoma. They filed a joint tax return. He was a staff pastor, and she was a salesperson who later became a teacher. They moved from Oklahoma to Florida for new job positions, and they incurred just different expenses. And they claimed some unreimbursed employee expenses on their tax return. They included vehicle expenses, travel expenses, meals and entertainment, and other business expenses. And they lost their records. Okay, so they attempted to reconstruct their mileage log from memory. So a little bit more of the details they lived in Oklahoma, and about middle of the year, he was employed as a staff pastor. She was a salesperson at a furniture store. And he did lots of things. In addition to his ministerial duties, he did facilities maintenance, tech work, graphic design services for the church. He traveled a lot. He attended conferences, retreats. He met with pastors. Normal, just doing way more than he normally would as just a pastor. So in early July, he began discussions with a new church in Florida about an executive youth pastor position. In middle of July, he traveled to Florida for an interview. His wife, joined him on the interview for a teaching position for a school that was affiliated with the church. Because their flight was out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, they drove to Dallas the day before the flight, and they spent the night at a hotel near the airport. So sometime following their interviews, they were offered the positions, and on or around middle August, they moved to Florida. They drove one vehicle by the wife and the other towed by a rented moving truck driven by the pastor, and they began their new positions in August. Her mom moved in with them, driving her own vehicle from Oklahoma to Florida about the same time. So the move, to say the least, just put a financial strain on them. They had not anticipated that because they were in a rural area. There just a lot of things. He was driving greater distances to meet with members of the parish. He made hospital visits, other things he had to do. He had to pay for the cost of driving out of his pocket. He was not reimbursed by his employer, okay? And I'm going to interject right here is you should know by now, my feelings about accountable reimbursement plans. You have got to put your pastors on accountable reimbursement plans. There is no reason whatsoever why your pastor should be doing all the driving, doing all the visitation, doing everything that he does and not getting reimbursed at bare minimum for his mileage. Okay. Mileage reimbursement and having that accountable reimbursement plan is tax-free income to the minister, and you need to be doing that. Okay. So obviously, this particular pastor, he did not have an accountable reimbursement plan, so all these driving expenses were out of his pocket. In addition, his wife had taken a significant pay decrease to accept the teaching position. And I don't know about you, but I know a lot of ministers who their sweet wives are teachers. I don't know what it is about pastors and teachers getting married, but I'm like, I know a lot of people who this could apply to. So anyway, she had no previous teaching experience at the time. So she had to purchase most of her classroom supplies and materials, including the chalk, the pencils, the paper, the notebooks, the markers. If you're a teacher, you know how much out-of-pocket expenses you all have every year. And a significant percentage of the students in her class came from low-income families, okay? So she spent a lot of additional funds for her classroom in addition to just the supplies for parties and incentives for good behavior with rewards and things like that. All right. So her mom, like I said, had moved with them. She struggled to find a job, and so she had extra, she stayed with them, which was an extra burden. And they had an extra bedroom in their home that they'd been used to store all their records and documents and office supplies, and to make room in their home for mom to move in, they moved all the paperwork to the garage. Okay. Well, as sometimes life just happens, less than 18 months later, the financial stress and the family issues took their toll, and they decided it was in their best interest to leave Florida and go back home. Okay. How awful for these people. They hoped to be allowed a few months for time to transition out of their current jobs and find new positions and housings. But the Florida church gave him 3 weeks and said, you're out, you're gone, be gone. Okay. So they reached out to actually his former church, and he was offered a position there. So they had all those moving expenses. Because of the funds available, they could only rent one moving truck going back. They carried back with them what they could, and they put everything else, lots and lots of stuff, and most of the stuff in the garage went into a storage building paid by the mom. Okay, so that's the background. Okay, so you've got the pastor, you got the teacher. They moved from Oklahoma to Florida, didn't work out. Just a few months later, they're moving back to Oklahoma. Okay. Well, they filed their tax return. It was filed on time. Okay. They claimed lots and lots of deductions. They claimed $31,000 in vehicle expenses, travel expenses, $2,800, meals, and other business expenses. So they had a total of $36,000 in expenses they were trying to claim. And they got audited. Okay. Again, I always say your chances of getting audited are small, but it does happen. And it did happen for this individual. Okay. So the first thing you need to know is that when you get audited, the burden of proof falls upon you to prove that the deductions you are claiming are legit, because as the commissioner for the IRS says, deductions are a matter of legislative grace, and taxpayers bear the burden of proving that they are entitled to any deduction claimed. Okay, doesn't surprise us. Okay, but anyways, that is what it is. So here's the issues, and this is why I wanted to discuss this, because this is going to apply to you. Okay, so he tried to claim vehicle expenses and travel expenses and meals and entertainment and all these other business expenses, additional educator expenses for the money that his wife spent, tax preparation fees. And the problem was, when they got audited, all of the documentation to prove this, guess where it was? It was in the boxes that got moved in the garage, that got put in the storage space that once mom moved back to Oklahoma, she quit paying the bill. They repossessed everything in the storage, and it's lost. So they're going through this audit with no documentation, none whatsoever. Okay. One thing you can do, though, is you can try to reconstruct some of your expenses. All right. But when you do that, you've got to be, they're really picky. They're really, really picky. Okay. So unfortunately, the petitioners failed to meet the substantiation requirements for the vehicle expenses, the travel expenses, all of this. And he tried to reconstruct the mileage log. He didn't have the sufficient, what they call sufficient specificity and corroborative evidence. So basically, these $37,535 in expenses they tried to claim, after the IRS was done with them, the court only allowed a small travel expense deduction of $877. Okay, not what you want to hear. So these are the practical implications that I want you to get out of this, okay? Taxpayers, you got to maintain detailed and contemporaneous records to substantiate deductions for unreimbursed employee expenses. That's the first one we're going to cover, okay? It used to be that if you paid for business expenses out of your own pocket, you could deduct them on Schedule A. But when the TCJA, which is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, passed in the Trump administration, it temporarily eliminated the ability to deduct unreimbursed business expenses on Schedule A for all taxpayers from, I think, 2017 to 2025. So it'll be up for review next year. It may change in 2025. Okay, so therefore, most unreimbursed employee expenses can't be claimed by a W-2 employee on their federal income taxes. However, there is still another way to deduct some unreimbursed expenses for members of the clergy. And that's why all of this matters. That's why I gave you all this background, okay? There's a revenue ruling 80-110 in which the IRS concluded that members of the clergy can deduct unreimbursed business expenses from gross income, but only when calculating their self-employment taxes on Schedule SE, which is for self-employment. Okay, so you can't do it on Schedule A, which takes it off your federal income taxes, but you can help it to reduce your self-employment taxes. So that's, I mean, it's not huge. It doesn't, save you a gazillion dollars in taxes, but something is better than nothing. Okay. But you have to remember that when you're doing the unreimbursed business expenses, that the expenses have to be ordinary and necessary expenses, and the expenses have to be paid or incurred during the tax year. So for ministers, that's going to mean expenses for conferences that you attend, any preaching software that you use, any subscriptions that you may use, books, continuing education for, preaching, for sermon prep or anything like that. Okay. And then another big one is the biggest thing that this couple tried to claim was their travel expenses. He tried to recreate a mileage log, which the IRS does use, but he did do a good job, guys. Okay. So here is how the IRS defines adequate records for your mileage log. All right. You need to have your total mileage for the year. You need the date that you traveled, the place or your destination that you traveled to, the business purpose of each trip. So if it's a hospital visit or a home visit or a sick call or ministering the gospel or whatever it may be, and the odometer readings at the start and end of the year. This is what you need in order to claim those mileage expenses. Whether you are turning it in to your church on an accountable reimbursement plan to get reimbursed for your mileage, which hopefully you're doing, and if not, so that you can at least claim this on your taxes to help reduce your self-employment taxes. All right. So what I do for my clients is literally on January 1st every year, they get an email or a text from me saying, go check the odometer on your car, write it down and send it to me. And I put it in their file. And as long as they do that on the 1st of every year, or at least within 2 weeks from the end of the year to the 1st of the year, we've got beginning and ending mileage that we can go by. Okay. So you also need to keep in mind that reconstructed records may not be sufficient to meet the substantiation requirements if you're not getting as detailed as they want. The IRS is detail, and I know you've heard me say document, 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 okay? Don't just, I hate they had all these receipts, but they just had one copy and they got lost, okay? With as much online technology as there is, as many apps as are available, paper copies are great, but you can, the IRS did allow some expenses because they had email receipts, okay? You can use a paper copy of a receipt. You can use emails. You can use printed receipts offline. And it doesn't have to be paper copies. Again, you can store everything in your Google Drive, or a Dropbox folder, a file, or a mileage app, whatever you've got. Just please document, document, document. Because again, your chances and odds of being audited are very low. But as this shows, it does happen. And these people were not millionaires. Their gross income for the year was between $68,000 and $69,000. It's just that they had such a large amount of business expenses they were trying to claim, and they couldn't substantiate them. So they lost, out of $38,000, they were only allowed $800. Okay? We don't want that to happen to you. So again, proper documentation is crucial to avoid disallowance of deductions during tax examinations. Okay? And I think I have probably talked enough for today. This one was a little longer, so I'm going to wrap that up. But just remember, document, document, document. Do an accountable reimbursement plan. If you're not on it, if your church doesn't have you on an accountable reimbursement plan, you need to have a meeting with your finance team or with your personnel team or whoever it is. You need to get on that, okay? So thank you for sharing your time with me today. The course is coming soon. If you have not signed up to be on the wait list to find out when my Intro to Church Finances course releases, do that today. The email or the web address for that is churchfinances.org/course waitlist. And as soon as it is available, which will hopefully be by the end of the month, I'm going to have this out here, and you will be the first to be notified when it is available, okay? So thanks again for listening today. If you haven't joined the free Facebook community yet, check it out at facebook.com/groups/church bookkeeping and clergy tax. And please know that no matter what is going on in your part of the world, God's got you. Be blessed, my friend. Bye-bye.